Okay, so what we're going to be looking at is when we've done equilibrium and we shifted our equilibrium based on gets tips for supply or timer or primer for demand. But what we're going to look at is what happens when we have disequilibrium. And so again, we're going to be looking at our price system, and again, everything in the market has a price and everything has to answer those three basic economic questions. Right? Are we willing and able and within a given time period to buy something?
Is that like saying assuming that everything in the market has a price, or is that saying as an economic law, like everything has a price?
Yes, because my love is priceless. So we cannot graph that.
Okay.
Okay?
So it's saying you can only graph the things that have a price?
Yes.
Okay.
Unlike my love, which is exponential. You cannot graph for that. Okay. So, you're going to graph for it.
Everything.
I know, in Ms. Wynn's class that's capable, but not in my class. Okay, because love has no price. Okay, right, because y'all do all that like fancy math.
Love has a price.
It does, I know. MasterCard reminds us. Okay, so this is what we did last time. Again, to graph, you always must graph E for equilibrium price and equilibrium quantity. And we're going to talk about this is when the price clears the market. Again, I'm going to say that again because if you see that on the test, it is when the supply and demand curve meet at the equilibrium price is where they clear the market. Both the supplier is agreeing on the quantity that is going to be supplied at that price, and the demander is agreeing on that quantity that is being supplied and the price. It clears the market. So we're going to talk about when we have disequilibrium. So one of the disequilibriums I'm going to talk about is a surplus. Looking at the price, where is it in relation to equilibrium? Above it. And because we know the law of demand, when price is high, what happens to demand? And so if I go up this demand curve to that high price, there's a very low quantity demanded. And if I know the law of supply, when price is high, what do suppliers want to do? Make more, because they're going to make more money, so they're willing to supply more. So I go up that supply graph above equilibrium, and there's a lot of quantity. Do y'all see that this is why there's a surplus? Because when the price is high, the demanders want less. And when the price is high, the suppliers want to give that much. So a surplus will always be over equilibrium. And we will always see quantity supply is greater than quantity demand. Y'all remember those little like gator things that they used to do? Greater than, less than. Right, y'all know what I'm talking about? If y'all saw that on the test, you'd be fine. Okay, so, and again, what will happen eventually, bless you, eventually this sends a signal to who? By the demanders not wanting to have this, and there is a surplus, who does this send to a signal that the price is too high? The suppliers that they need to cut back, right? And then eventually maybe they need to cut price. And then eventually it will get back to an equilibrium. And all prices try to push back to equilibrium. So then a shortage, if I talked about a surplus being above equilibrium, a surplus would be what? A shortage is above, a surplus is above equilibrium, and a shortage would be below. Okay, so looking at this, the price is below equilibrium. And so when we know demanders, when the price is low, they want to demand more. So the demand, the quantity of demand is a lot. But suppliers, when the price is low, they don't want to supply. And so this is why it's below equilibrium. It's a shortage. And there are things that our government does to create shortages. Okay? And we'll be looking at those, and we're going to give them different names in a second. Okay? So how do we eliminate a shortage? Raise the price. So when things are often like they go like lower prices, the demand goes up to get it. Okay? So we're going to see that. Have you ever heard of like rent control or anything like that? No? Some people have? Okay. There is rent control, and I'm going to get to this in the next slide because I think I'm done with this PowerPoint about it moving up. So it just functions of price. It's informative. It's incentive. It has a limitation. There's advantages. You know, it doesn't discriminate. It's neutral. It's flexible. Let me get to the next slide. Okay, we're not gonna talk about negative externalities. Okay, I'm gonna get to this next PowerPoint, and I'm gonna give you both of these, because I'm gonna talk about how the government creates price controls. And a price control is when the government comes in to set the minimum or maximum price for a certain good. Okay, so a price ceiling, it is the max legal price that can be paid for a good or service. And this is gonna be below equilibrium. It sounds weird, a ceiling below, but just look at what I'm gonna do. Okay, here is the price ceiling. Can the price go above this ceiling? No. No. And so, is it gonna cause a shortage?
Yeah.
Yes. So rent control is an example. Like in New York, I don't know if any of you watch Friends or like Seinfeld. There was another New York one where they all lived in these like massive apartments that were really big, but they had low rent because they were in rent control apartments. And that means someone had gotten a benefit from the government because they realized people cannot live in major cities and afford to live in a major city making minimum wage. Like if they were like baristas or they were like regular janitors, they could not live there. And so certain buildings had to offer rent control so that people could afford. But do you think those people wanted to give up those homes? Those, and so that's why it created a shortage, because everybody wanted to demand those because the rent should be higher, right? And so the suppliers, did they want to give those rent control? No. Even though they were required, there was a percentage required to give. And even today, there is, every single apartment complex is required by law. Like, so there's one that's right next to Felty being built right across from it. And I think rent for a 1 bedroom is like $1,200. And up to a 3 bedroom is like $1,800. But they have to provide rent control. So there will be a couple of apartments within there that it is affordable for people who are living below an income to be able to live. So they may get their apartment for $600 versus paying the full asking price. Yes?
How do you, like, I don't know how to explain it. So do they look at your income? So say someone that's making, I don't even know what like the numbers, like say you're making like, 30,000, and then someone else is making like 60,000. They look at that before, like,
Before you sign a parental agreement, yes, they do look at your income. So eventually when I get to personal finance, I'm going to start talking about all those things in college, because eventually your first year in college, you're going to live on the campus. Mm-hmm. But sometimes some of y'all are going to live off campus. And they actually look at your credit history, which is the 3 most important numbers you'll ever have versus GPA, okay? And they're going to look at that number, but a lot of y'all don't have credit history. So you're going to have your parents sign a rental agreement for you. And they also look at your income. So if you're going to a student-centered living place, they know that you don't have that, okay? And actually a lot of stuff done by the university, there is rental control. Most of those places that say that they're university focused, they have price controls too. Because if you go to Austin, like I think it's like on average it's like $700 to live in like Jester at UT. But if you go live at an apartment downtown in Austin, you're looking at $2,000 a month just to live in a place downtown. And so we'll be looking at that in personal finance. But they do. You have an application, and they ask you your job. They're gonna use your social security numbers. They're gonna run your numbers so they can find out your credit score. If you don't have a good credit score, they may ask for a lot more up front, and they may ask that you pay a whole lot more because they're trying to deter you. But eventually, once you get a better credit score, it's gonna go down. But there's places that they're all like. Have you ever heard of Section 8 housing? Mm-hmm. That's right here. It is a control. Y'all know where Burleson Honey is? Mm-hmm. Yeah. All of that's Section 8, and the government has come in saying, okay, we're only going to offer this area, and all the houses are together. And I think it's right next. There's another one next to the pool. What's the name of that pool?
The Optimist.
The Optimist pool.
Optimist.
Yeah, there's one right there, and they're all Section 8. And the government says, okay, but is there a lot of bells and whistles with it? No. Okay, and so many of these major apartment complexes, they're going to say, yes, we will adhere to it, but are they going to offer a lot of those? No. So again, it's very slim pickings when you get into the nicer ones. But Section 8, it's it's standard, but again, it's that rent control. And you'll see Section 8 housing in New York. You'll see them in major cities close to downtown because they're dealing with the workers. But do y'all see how this leads a ceiling? It's the max price. It cannot go over. It's going to create a shortage. A lot of people had trouble with ceilings being below equilibrium, but it doesn't matter where they are because it's the function that it doesn't allow things to push above because it's the max. Y'all got it?
Okay, so if you get like federal funding, like I get child support from the government, not from my dad, would that be considered?
Yes, because if you actually looked at how, like for example, if I did child support, if I did people who are on Social Security, there's a max that they could get, right? But actually, if you look at the cost of living's way up here. And so that's what they're arguing, that stuff for Social Security, child support, and all the other funding for people who are in need needs to go up. And they actually do this with Medicaid, Medicare, that they tell those doctors, this is the max price that we will pay you. But the price is really up here, right? So do those people want to take them, Medicaid and Medicare people? No. And so is there a shortage of doctors who are willing to provide services because that price is low, okay? Now let's go to the other half. Okay, it wants to push upward, but it can't because of the law. And that leads to the permanent shortage.
So what good does that do?
It drives up prices for everybody else. And then it basically leads to, like, if we talk about Medicaid, Medicare, people are going without services.
Right.
And so these are like drafts that they have in the halls of Congress saying, let's filter that because people are going without aid. The cost of living is rising. But we're going to talk about something that most businesses take into consideration. It's called a COLA, a cost of living adjustment, that when the price of inflation goes up, prices go up because of inflation, your income should go up. But on average, people do not have COLAs. So when I get into personal finance, I'm going to talk about if your business offers you a COLA, which is not a drink, but a cost of living adjustment, you take, okay, I get 3%, inflation has gone up 3%. Like I was telling my husband, like he got to negotiate his raise because he's the boss. And I was like, well, the cost of living is 3%. It just went up. You asked for 5% and you got a 2% raise. Because we're looking at this right here. And we're trying to get it to where it is at equilibrium or just a little bit above. And so we'll get to all of that in personal finance, of how to be better individuals for yourself or be wiser individuals because you're already better, okay? Next thing is this, a price floor and a support. It is the minimum legal price that can be paid for a good or service. So this will be above equilibrium, okay? And what's happening, it wants to push downward, but they've set the price higher than the market's willing to give. So actually one of the greatest examples of a price floor is minimum wage. What's minimum wage today? Because they're raising it, but actually that rate should be really low. Because if the market and the demanders, and so they're trying to raise the wages because the cost of living. But even then, people who are working at minimum wage, are they saying that it should be higher? And so this is why they're going to people in Congress saying, look, yes, you have a price floor, but we need to lift that because actually this floor, this equilibrium has gone above because of all the other things that are going on. But really, do suppliers want to pay their workers a lot? No, they want to bring them down. But do workers want to be paid a lot more?
Yes.
And so this is why the government has come in and put a floor. They also did this when we were having the oil crisis. Which the oil crisis, we know that there was not enough oil, but people couldn't afford the oil, and they put in a floor, which was not working. And it was just the wrong thing to do, was to raise those prices. And this is why Jimmy Carter wasn't liked. But again, you're just gonna have to know minimum wage for this one. How do y'all feel about these?
Would that be kind of like in a natural disaster? When
yes, when they raise the prices for bottled water. That's an example.
Okay.
And actually when they did that with Harvey, there were price gouging. Price gouging is an example, and it actually went to Governor Abbott, that he said they had to refund that because they were doing that with gasoline and they were doing that with water. And if people kept their receipts, because they were setting this floor, they were able to get their money back because it was a natural disaster. Shouldn't have been doing that. Okay? Are we okay with this content? All right, we're gonna do one activity. Go ahead and go to the restroom because by the time I pass out papers, you'll be back.
Bye, Colton. Bye, Felicia.
Who is Felicia?
Friday, you gotta watch the movie.
Have you never seen Friday?
I have. That's the one where we have like peanut butter, vanilla.
No, not at all.
Like Friday. It's a movie
Like
with
Friday with Ice Cube and Day.
Yeah.
No, isn't that the one where they like look in the fridge and that's like the first scene?
They're high the entire movie.
That I haven't watched it. I don't know which movie
Oh,
it
yeah.
is. Thursday, Friday. Oh, this is why it was Felicia. They're all Felicia. Her name is Felicia.
She's like the crazy girlfriend.
Is the camera still rolling?
Oh, yeah.